Then this SPV actually buys the mortgages, but this special company has no money, hence they issue a bond backed by the proceed from the mortgages in the pool of mortgages that they just bought. So proceed when they issue this bond, the general public uh, purchases these bonds, and SPV is able to pay for the mortgages they bought. From this point on, the only function of the SPV is to collect the payments from the mortgages in the pool and distribute it to the bondholders. That's all they're doing. So every month, the borrowers in the mortgage pool make their payments to their bank, this bank that originated the mortgage typically continues to service the loan, which means, they are still the interface with the customers who borrowed. And banks send those payments to the SPV, and SPV prorates the payments to the bondholder. These bonds typically have a denomination of face value. $1,000, which represents the loan balance. That means if you have about $1,000, you can actually lend somebody as a mortgage because you're buying a bond that's backed by proceeds from these mortgages. If these guys don't pay, you don't get paid unless it's federally insured. This is a simple but a very effective piece of financial engineering that allows mortgage lenders not to keep the mortgages on their balance sheet. I mean, these have been around since 70s or so, but they became really very common and very widely used in the 90s and 2000s. Back in 70s and 80s, a lot of the mortgages were given by companies called savings and loan institutions. These were kind of special bank that pretty much only accepted savings from their customers, and they primarily gave loans for mortgages. And a lot of these guys, especially earlier on in the 70s, where the interest rate paid on savings were federally limited. There was actually a regulation that didn't allow interest rates more than 3%, but there was no limit on how much they could charge on mortgages. It was pretty much determined by the market. It was a very profitable line for savings and loan institutions. But, late 70s and early 80s, that regulation was rescinded. And suddenly these banks or these savings and loan institutions, they had fixed rate assets, which are mortgages. There is a fixed interest rate, and they find themselves in a high interest rate environment. And most of their funding was from savings, which are, by their very definition, short-term instruments. So they started losing a lot of money on these mortgages, and eventually most of them went bankrupt, and U.S. government actually bailed out these institutions. It costs using dollars of 80s and 90s about $500 billion to clean them up. In today's dollars, that's probably around $2 trillion. But if these mortgage pooling was available, especially aided by the federal government, a lot of those loans could have been simply sold into pools, and those banks and savings and loan institutions would not have to keep them on their balances. Now, you can use the same mortgage pool, and create different type of cash flows. The most basic one is called a pass-through mortgage pool, or a pass-through security in general, where all the SPV does passes the cash flow from the assets that back the security to the holders of the security. Quite a bit of the mortgage-backed securities are like that. It is also common to have securities backed by credit card receivables. For example, a lot of banks give you special rates for the first year or two, right? And especially if you do transfers. Basically, the way they do it, banks pool their credit card receivables.